Elliot
Don't look so
Grayson woke
surprised.
before the
I told
alarm,
you we would have
as he
fun.
always did, to the faint whisper of
I think I
rain
am
tapping
getting
on the
pretty good at
kitchen
this.
window. The house was still and familiar, filled with the quiet hum of old wood and the faint scent of maple syrup that had somehow clung to its walls from years of Saturday breakfasts. He stood there for a long moment, letting the silence settle, before the small voice he loved most broke through. "Daddy, are you making the round pancakes or the funny ones today?" Maisie padded into the kitchen, her curls wild, pajamas covered in stars. "Round ones today," he said, smiling softly. "Funny ones are for Saturdays," she grinned. "But what if it's Saturday in another country?" He laughed, a sound that came out rusty but real, and ruffled her hair. That was how their mornings went. Pancakes, school chatter, her favorite volcano books scattered across the table. She liked to tell him about lava flows and ash plumes, as if the world outside Ashland were full of fire and wonder. He let her talk, the way fathers do when they know the day will be long and the moments short. Outside, the maple tree on Granite Street was already turning red. Leaves clung to the branches like memories reluctant to fall. After breakfast, Elliot buttoned his navy shirt, glanced in the hallway mirror, and caught sight of Sophia's photograph, the one taken at Lithia Park the summer before she passed. He touched the frame gently, then turned away. "Ready, Bug?" Maisie nodded, backpack bouncing. The drive to school was short, but she filled it with questions. "Daddy, do you think volcanoes get lonely when they stop erupting?" He smiled. "Maybe they just need a rest, like us." She considered that, then said, "You never rest." He wanted to answer, but the light turned green, and the moment passed. At the school gate, she wrapped her arms around him tight. "Do you ever get lonely, Daddy?" The question caught him mid-breath. He opened his mouth, then closed it, forcing a smile. "Not when I have you." She looked up at him, unconvinced but kind, the way children are when they sense truth and try to forgive it. When she disappeared through the doors, he stood there longer than necessary, hands buried in his pockets, rain misting against his hair. He stopped by Riverside Cafe, a corner place with good coffee and the kind of music that made silence feel less lonely. The waitress, an older woman with silver hair tied neatly back, greeted him by name. "Morning, Mr. Grayson. Usual?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied. "He always said ma'am. It felt right." The radio behind the counter hummed an old jazz tune from the 50s. A man at the counter laughed with his wife, their wedding rings catching the light. Elliot's gaze drifted there and then away. By 9, he was at the Ashland Commons Counseling Center, where people came to untangle the parts of life they couldn't manage alone. He'd been good at listening, too good, some said. The quiet man with the calm voice and steady eyes. But in the break room that morning, the calm cracked slightly. Liam, his colleague, was leaning against the counter, coffee in hand. "Morning, St. Elliot," he said, smirking. "Save any souls yet today?" Sean snickered beside him, and Cal, the third of their little group, offered a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. Elliot only nodded, brushing off the jab. "Just doing my job." Liam tilted his head. "That's what they say about priests, too." The room filled with uneasy laughter. He didn't respond, but when he turned away, the sting lingered. People thought kindness was an act, something to wear like a good suit when the boss was watching. They didn't know how much effort it took to hold yourself together when the world had already taken half of what you loved. Back at his desk, a child's drawing hung beside the calendar Maisie's work, all bright colors and wobbly letters. Me, Daddy, and Mommy in heaven smiling. The crayon sun had a halo of gold. He touched the corner of the paper, tracing the small hearts she'd added beside their names. There were things no one at the office knew. How he'd stopped wearing his wedding ring not out of forgetfulness, but because it made people look at him with pity. How he still kept Sophia's favorite scarf in the drawer beside his bed. How sometimes, when he tucked Maisie in, he could still hear his wife humming the lullaby that ended too soon. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the pavement shining like glass. He gathered his things at 5, drove home past rows of houses glowing with porch lights, and felt the ache of repetition settle in again. Dinner was simple soup and crackers, cartoons murmuring softly in the background. Maisie laughed at the same jokes he'd stopped understanding years ago. That night, while tucking her in, she pressed her tiny hand over his and said, "Maybe you'll laugh again someday, Daddy." He looked at her surprised. "I do laugh." She shook her head. "Not like before." He smoothed her hair, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Sleep, bug." When the house went still again, he stood by the window. The street lamps glowed against the mist, casting amber light over the wet pavement. Somewhere down the block, a neighbor's wind chime tinkled softly in the wind. Elliot leaned his forehead against the cool glass, breathing in the quiet. He didn't know that somewhere in this same town, a group of his colleagues were already planning something cruel in the name of curiosity, and he couldn't possibly know that one of them would soon hand him the chance to prove that his kindness wasn't an act but the truest part of who he was. That night, before sleep claimed him, he glanced again at the drawing taped above his nightstand. The three smiling figures looked back at him through time. Outside, the maple trees shivered in the wind, scattering a few more leaves across the porch. The house on Granite Street stayed quiet, too quiet for a man who had once known laughter that filled every corner. He closed his eyes, unaware that a single dinner invitation, offered in jest, was waiting to change everything. That night, while tucking Maisie in, she whispered, "Maybe you'll laugh again someday, Daddy." He doesn't know someone's about to make that wish come true in the cruelest way. By Thursday afternoon, the clouds over Ashland had turned a soft shade of gray, hanging low enough to kiss the rooftops. Inside the Ashland Commons Counseling Center, the air smelled faintly of coffee and carpet cleaner, an ordinary smell for an ordinary day. Elliot was finishing a session with a client when laughter drifted from the break room, the kind that carried too much energy to be harmless. He wrapped up his notes, offering the usual words of reassurance, then stepped into the hallway. Liam Cutter leaned against the vending machine, a smirk tugging at his mouth. Sean Mercer and Cal Everett sat nearby, coffee cups in hand, whispering like boys who thought mischief made them clever. "Look who it is," Liam said, raising his cup. "St. Elliot, savior of lost causes." Elliot gave a polite nod. "Afternoon." Liam's smile sharpened. "You know, we were just talking about that promotion Mr. Pierce keeps hinting at. Head therapist position, pretty big deal." Didn't know it was public yet," Elliot replied, reaching for a packet of sugar. "Oh, it's not," Liam said smoothly. "But everyone knows the favorite, don't we?" Cal shifted uncomfortably, pretending to study his coffee. Sean chuckled, though the sound was forced. "He's right, man. You've got the halo treatment. Clients love you. Boss loves you. Makes the rest of us look like we need confession." Elliot stirred his coffee quietly, then said, "If you have something to say it." "Ace." Liam took a slow sip. "Just wondering if that kindness act ever gets tiring. You know, all the listening, the sympathy. Must be exhausting pretending to care all the time." The words hung in the air like smoke. Elliot met his eyes for a brief, calm moment. "It's not an act," he said softly. "And it's not exhausting." Then he left, the door swinging shut behind him with a muted click. Liam watched him go, jaw tightening. "He's too perfect. Nobody's that good unless they're hiding something." Maybe he's just good," Cal offered weakly. "Or maybe," Liam said, eyes narrowing, "we should find out." The idea began as a whisper, an offhand joke born of envy and restlessness. But in offices like theirs, where ambition and resentment shared the same hallway, jokes had a way of turning into plans. That evening, after most employees had gone home, Liam stayed behind with Sean and Cal. Lights dimmed, voices low. "He's got everyone fooled," Liam said. "Always talking about inclusion, compassion, all that PR stuff. But let's see what happens when he's not in control." Sean frowned. "What are you thinking?" "A little social experiment," Liam said, leaning back. "Set him up on a blind date. Record it. Nothing illegal, just revealing." Cal hesitated. "That's pushing it," Liam smirked. "Not if it proves what we already know. I say we make it interesting. The date's with someone who'll test him a deaf woman. Let's see how long St. Elliot lasts when kindness isn't convenient." The words landed like stones in still water. Sean whistled softly. "That's cold." Liam shrugged. "No, that's fair. He built a career on empathy. Let's see it in action." Cal rubbed his temples. "You're talking about humiliating someone." "Not if she never finds out," Liam said quickly. "We'll just record his reaction, that's all. The moment he realizes. You know how it goes. Awkward pause, polite excuse, he bolts. Then we send it to the career forum anonymously. Mr. Pierce will see the real him." Sean grinned, half ashamed. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack," Liam replied. "And when the truth's out, The golden boy falls off his pedestal. Cal didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the silence. Outside, the last daylight faded behind the mountains, and the office settled into the quiet of after hours. It was in that stillness that the cruelty of the plan took root unspoken, yet already alive. The next morning came with a pale sky and the scent of wet leaves drifting through the open window of Elliot's kitchen. He was packing Maisie's lunch when his phone buzzed on the counter, a message from an unfamiliar number. "Hi, this is Megan. I got your contact from a friend of a friend. I know this is sudden, but would you be open to a blind dinner this Friday? I've heard wonderful things about you." Elliot blinked, uncertain if he'd read it correctly. He hadn't been on a date in 4 years. The thought alone felt foreign, like stepping into a language he'd forgotten how to speak. He poured coffee into his mug, reading the message again, the corners of his mouth twitching in something between disbelief and curiosity. Maisie came skipping into the kitchen, hair still damp from her morning shower. "Who's texting you, Daddy?" "A friend," he said carefully. Her eyes widened. "A girlfriend?" He smiled, shaking his head. "It's just a message, Bug." She hopped up onto the stool, chin resting on her hand. "You should go. You always tell me trying new things is good for growing." He raised an eyebrow. "Did I say that? Every time you make me eat broccoli." He laughed, a quiet sound that warmed the room. Touché. Later that day at the office, the air felt different. Liam greeted him with unusual cheer. "Morning, Elliot. Big plans this weekend?" he asked, tone too light to be casual. "Just a quiet dinner," Elliot replied, unaware of the cameras already planned, the table already reserved. "Good for you, man," Liam said. "Life's short." His grin lingered a second too long. By Friday afternoon, the plan was set in motion. Liam, Sean, and Cal sat in Liam's car across from the Riverside Cafe, reviewing angles like amateur directors. "You sure this is gonna work?" Sean muttered. "It'll work," Liam said. "When she walks in, he'll panic. No man keeps up the saint act forever." Cal swallowed hard. "What if he surprises us?" Liam scoffed. "People don't change that much." Inside his office, Elliot straightened his tie in the reflection of the darkened window. He hadn't worn it since Sophia's memorial service. The gesture felt heavy, ceremonial. The same jazz station hummed softly in the background, a melody of brass and memory. He paused, thinking of Maisie's voice that morning. "You should go." He drove slowly through town, past the park where she liked to feed ducks, past the bookstore with the crooked sign. The cafe glowed warm in the dusk, gold light spilling across the sidewalk. For a moment he almost turned back, but he remembered the look in Maisie's eyes, the mix of hope and something deeper, the wish every child has for a parent who's happy again. He parked beneath the maple tree, leaves fluttering against the windshield like small red wings. Inside the cafe, candles flickered on white tablecloths. He checked his watch, 6:55 p.m. He was early. He always was. In a corner booth, a phone light blinked red for a moment before going dark again. Derek's thumb hovered over the record button, heart steady with anticipation. The table next to him was occupied by Sean and Cal, pretending to study the menu. "Relax," Liam whispered. "He'll show. St. Elliot never breaks a promise." "Oh." At 7 sharp, Elliot stepped through the door, the bell above it chiming softly. The hostess greeted him with a polite smile. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes," he said, clearing his throat. "Meeting someone. A blind date. Her name's Megan." "Of course," she replied, gesturing toward the table by the window. "Right this way." He followed, hands slipping nervously into his pockets. Outside, the light rain returned, tracing delicate patterns down the glass. He sat, adjusting the silverware, rehearsing the small things. Say something kind. Be yourself. Don't overthink. At the corner booth, Liam muttered, "Perfect spot. We'll catch his face the second he realizes." Sean's camera phone glowed faintly beneath the table. Cal looked pale, eyes darting between them. "This feels wrong," he whispered. "Too late," Liam hissed. "Showtime." "Oh." Elliot glanced at the reflection in the window, a man with neat hair, tired eyes, a half smile that didn't quite reach. He thought about Sophia for the first time in months, without feeling the sting of grief. Maybe Maisie was right. Maybe it was time. A moment later, the cafe door opened, and a woman stepped inside, shaking rain from her coat. Long blonde hair, gentle eyes scanning the room. The hostess greeted her, lips moving slowly, deliberately. And in that single instant, Elliot noticed the detail no one had told him. Outside, under the rain-slick street lamp, the men in the car leaned forward, breathless. "Here we go," Liam whispered. Elliot adjusted his collar, exhaled once, and smiled at the approaching woman. He had no idea 3 cameras were waiting. The rain had softened into a mist by the time Elliot rose from his chair. The cafe glowed with amber light, its windows fogged by the warmth inside. Conversations blended into a soft murmur, a faint jazz tune drifting from hidden speakers. Yet, as the door opened and she entered, it was as though the music itself paused for a breath. She stood for a moment in the doorway, blonde hair damp from the rain, blue-gray eyes scanning the room with measured intent. There was something cautious in the way she moved, as if she'd learned to study a room before it had the chance to hurt her. When the hostess spoke, the woman's gaze stayed fixed on her lips, watching them carefully. She nodded, smiled, and followed. "Mr. Grayson?" the hostess said, leading her to his table. Elliot stood, heart quickening. "Megan?" The woman smiled, her expression warm but slightly uncertain. "Yes," she said, her voice carrying the distinct rhythm of someone who could not hear her own tone. "It's so nice to meet you." And then, in the next heartbeat, he understood. Her eyes didn't follow his gestures, but his mouth. Her movements were precise, deliberate, graceful in their control. Elliot felt the realization wash through him, not with discomfort, but with recognition, an echo of a language long tucked away in memory. Instead of words, his hands rose. The motion came instinctively, like an old melody rediscovered. "It's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for being here," he signed with steady, careful grace. For a moment, Megan froze, her lips parted, eyes widening with disbelief. Around them, the chatter of the cafe went on, spoons clinking, laughter rippling. But inside that small circle of light, there was silence and understanding. "You sign," she whispered. He nodded. "My mother was deaf." His hands moved, each gesture fluid. "She taught me before I could talk." Her face softened. A small, startled laugh escaped her. "That's amazing." She made sure I learned it properly," he continued, smiling faintly. "Said, if I wanted to live in her world, I needed to speak her language." From the corner booth, Liam's camera caught every movement, every expression. But instead of the humiliation they'd hoped for, what they saw unsettled them. A man not awkward or panicked, but present, engaged, gentle. Elliot gestured toward the menu, offering to translate. Megan nodded, still a little dazed. "I haven't met anyone who signs fluently in years," she admitted, her fingers trembling slightly. "Usually, it's people who know the alphabet and get stuck halfway." "I had good reason to practice," he replied softly. "My mom passed, but I still sign when I think of her. It's like she's still part of the conversation." Megan looked down, blinking quickly. "You have no idea how rare that is." He smiled, patient. "Then tonight's already worth it." Their server arrived, a young man with a practiced smile. Elliot spoke aloud for both of them, but as the waiter listed the specials, his hands moved too, translating each word into sign language. Megan's lips curved into a smile that reached her eyes. She hadn't needed to ask. Across the room, Cal leaned closer to Liam. "He's actually doing it. Look at him." Liam's jaw clenched. "It's an act. Just wait. Nobody keeps that up all night." Sean, holding his phone low, muttered, "Doesn't look like acting to me." At their table, Megan laughed at something Elliot had signed, an easy, melodic laugh that turned a few heads nearby. "You make it seem so natural," she signed. "Like, it's not work at all." "It isn't," he replied, his smile tinged with something almost wistful. "It's like remembering how to breathe." For a long moment, they sat in comfortable silence. Megan studied the flickering candle between them, the light painting gold across her hands. "Most people," she signed slowly, "see my deafness before they see me." "And what do you want them to see?" Elliot asked. She met his gaze, steady now. "Just a woman having dinner." He nodded, the corners of his eyes softening. "Then that's all I see." For a brief instant, the world seemed to shrink to that table, 2 people connected by a language most had forgotten, finding comfort in shared quiet. Outside, rain brushed against the windows, like gentle applause. Inside, something fragile and hopeful took root. And from the far corner, unseen eyes watched, growing uneasy with every passing minute. The dinner stretched into something timeless, the kind of evening that lives in the quiet places of memory. Elliot found himself leaning forward more often, watching her hands move gracefully through the air, fluid, deliberate, almost like a dance. Her laughter wasn't loud, but when it came, it lit the space around them. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man sitting across from a stranger. He felt like someone remembering how to live. Megan told him about her work at the public library, the children's reading program she organized every weekend. "Sometimes," she sighed, "I read aloud even though I can't hear my own voice. The kids don't care. They just like the story." Her eyes sparkled as she signed story. Elliot smiled, moved by the honesty in her words. "That's how it works," he replied. "We all tell stories we can't hear until someone listens." She tilted her head, watching him. "You sound like someone who listens for a living." He hesitated. "Maybe that's true, but sometimes I forget to listen to myself." For a while, they talked about everything: ordinary books, the weather, the funny quirks of small-town life, the kind of talk that didn't aim to impress, only to connect. The candle between them burned low, its light softening their faces. Every so often, Elliot caught the faint scent of her perfume, clean and subtle, like wildflowers after rain. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, something else was quietly beginning. At the corner booth, Liam shifted impatiently. "He's too calm," he hissed. "Zoom in when she signs." Sean adjusted his phone. "You said he'd freeze." "He's not freezing." Cal's voice was low, uneasy. "You wanted to catch him slipping, not falling in love." "Don't start," Liam muttered. "We've got what we need." But even as he said it, his confidence faltered. Through the lens, the man they mocked looked nothing like the self-righteous saint he'd imagined. He looked human. Elliot reached for the check, but Megan shook her head, signing "My turn." He smiled and signed back "Next time." She blinked, surprised. "Next time?" "Only if you want there to be one," he said gently. Her lips curved into a quiet smile. "I'd like that." They walked outside together, into the cool air, scented with rain and pine. The street was quiet, the wet pavement catching the glow of the cafe lights. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Megan looked up at the dark sky, then back at him. "You didn't ask about it," she signed. "About what?" "My hearing." "I didn't need to," he replied. "You already told me everything that matters." She smiled, a real, unguarded one that reached her eyes. "You're different, Elliot." "Maybe just out of practice," he said softly. "It's been a while since I've met someone worth listening to." They lingered at the curb, neither quite ready to say goodbye. The sound of a passing car broke the stillness, and Megan glanced toward it, then back at him. "You should let people see this side of you more often." "What side is that?" "The one that still believes in good things." Emmet. Her words settled over him like a blessing. He watched as she crossed the street, her silhouette fading into the mist. When she turned once to wave, he found himself smiling a real smile, one that didn't feel borrowed from the past. From across the street, the men in the car stayed silent. The plan that had started as a cruel game now looked like something else entirely. Sean lowered his phone. "You're not really going to post that, are you?" he asked quietly. Liam didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the screen, on the man walking away alone but lighter somehow. The lines around his mouth softened by something close to peace. Later that night, Elliot sat by the window again, watching the rain return in a thin silver veil. Maisie was asleep, her nightlight casting a soft glow down the hall. On the kitchen counter lay a napkin folded in half with careful handwriting that said, "Thank you for tonight. Megan." He held it for a long time before setting it down beside his daughter's drawing, both small reminders of worlds that could still be kind. And somewhere, in a dimly lit apartment across town, Liam uploaded a single file to his private folder, a video labeled St. Elliot MP4. He didn't notice the way his hand trembled, or the small flicker of doubt that crossed his face. Elliot didn't see the red camera light flicker in the reflection of the cafe window. Monday morning came with a kind of stillness that felt heavier than quiet. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets washed clean. But something in the air told Elliot the calm wouldn't last. He arrived at the counseling center early, coffee in hand, a faint hum of a tune on his lips. The weekend had left him lighter, like a door he hadn't known was locked had quietly opened. Maisie had asked that morning if he'd seen the lady who couldn't hear. He'd smiled and said, "Not today, Bug. Maybe soon." The memory of Megan's smile lingered with him all the way to work. But by the time he stepped into the office, the air inside felt wrong. Too quiet, too watchful. Conversations dimmed when he passed. Shoulders shifted. Eyes dropped to screens. At first, he thought it was his imagination. Then he saw Liam leaning against the reception desk, arms folded, a grin that didn't belong in any kind of kindness. "Morning," Elliot said. "Morning," Liam replied, voice casual but sharp around the edges. "Heard you had a good night Friday." Elliot frowned. "You heard?" "Oh, small town," Liam said with a shrug. "Word travels. You and your mystery date Megan, was it?" Something cold brushed the back of Elliot's neck. "How do you know her name?" Liam smiled wider. "Guess I'm just good at guessing." He walked away then, leaving a trail of laughter that wasn't really laughter at all. Elliot stood for a moment, the world tilting just slightly off-center. He shook it off, but the unease followed him through every corridor. At lunch, Cal appeared in his doorway, pale and fidgeting. "Hey," he said, voice low. "You might want to check something." "What's wrong?" Elliot asked. Cal looked down. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." He set his phone on the desk, screen facing up. A video was paused mid-frame. The soft light of Riverside Cafe, Elliot signing across the table. Megan's smile caught in motion. The caption above it read, "St. Elliot, the perfect therapist, in action." The world narrowed to that small glowing screen. Elliot pressed play, and there he was, every gesture, every word, turned into spectacle. The comments below scrolled endlessly. "This guy's fake. So rehearsed. No one's that good." A few were kinder, but the cruelty outnumbered them. "Where did this come from?" he asked quietly. Cal swallowed. "Liam and Sean set it up. Hidden cameras. They wanted to prove you were acting." "And you?" "I told them it was wrong," Cal said, his voice shaking. "But they didn't listen. I'm sorry, Elliot. I should have stopped it." Elliot didn't speak for a long time. He just sat there, the hum of the office fading into a hollow silence. Outside his window, the maple tree stood motionless, stripped of half its leaves overnight. When he finally looked up, his eyes were steady, not angry, just tired in a way that words couldn't fix. "Does she know?" Cal shook his head. "Not yet. The video hasn't spread outside the forum. But it will. They think it's funny." "Funny?" Elliot repeated, the word heavy on his tongue. He turned off the phone and set it aside. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Elliot stood, his chair scraping quietly against the floor. "Thank you for telling me, Cal." I'm sorry," Cal whispered again. Elliot nodded once, then walked down the hall. Each step felt heavier than the last. The light in Liam's office glowed bright, the sound of laughter drifting through the open door. Elliot stopped at the threshold. "Elliot," Liam said, spinning in his chair. "Did you see the look on Elliot's face stopped him cold." "Why?" Elliot asked softly. His voice wasn't raised, but it carried through the room like thunder before a storm. "What did you hope to prove?" Liam's grin faltered. "It was just a joke. You humiliated her," Elliot said, stepping closer. "A woman who trusted me. Someone who's lived her life fighting to be seen. And you turned her into a punchline." For a moment, even Liam couldn't meet his eyes. "It's not personal," he muttered. "We just wanted people to see what you're really like." Elliot stared at him. "And what am I, Liam?" Liam looked away. "A man who hides behind kindness." The words hung in the air like smoke, sharp and bitter. Elliot took a slow breath. "If kindness is something you have to hide behind, maybe that says more about the world than it does about me." Then he turned and walked out, leaving the office in stunned silence. Out in the hallway, the walls seemed to close in. His phone buzzed again, an unknown number, a message that made his heart drop. "Megan, someone sent me a video. Please tell me this isn't you." He stared at the words until they blurred. The sound in his ears wasn't silence. It was the memory of her laughter. now broken by betrayal. He typed, deleted, and typed again, but no words seemed enough. Outside, the clouds gathered again over Ashland, dark and low. Somewhere down the hall, Liam's laughter returned, thinner now, almost nervous. And in that moment, Elliot realized what forgiveness would cost and that he wasn't ready to give it. By late afternoon, the clouds had swallowed the Sunday Elliot sat in his car outside the library, staring at the message still glowing on his phone. He hadn't replied. He didn't know how. No words could make sense of the ache sitting heavy in his chest. Through the windshield, he saw Megan standing by the steps, her yellow cardigan bright against the gray sky. She looked smaller somehow, her posture tight, guarded. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he stepped out, the air sharp with rain and regret. She turned as he approached. There were no greetings, no small talk, just the quiet distance of two people who'd shared something real and now stood on opposite sides of it. "You should have told me," she signed, her hands trembling but controlled. "I didn't know," he signed back, every motion slow, careful. "They set it up. I didn't." "You didn't notice?" she interrupted, the signs sharp. "You didn't see the phone? The angle?" "You're a therapist, Elliot. You read people for a living." He flinched, but didn't look away. "I saw what I wanted to see. You." Her expression faltered for just a heartbeat before hardening again. "Do you have any idea how it feels? To find a video of yourself online turned into a joke? To have strangers laughing at you for trusting someone?" "I took it down," he said quickly. "Before it spread. It's gone." "Gone?" Her hands moved in a blur. "Nothing's ever gone. Once it's out there, it's forever." The wind lifted her hair as she spoke, strands sticking to her damp cheeks. The sight of her hurt, betrayed, still trying to stay composed, broke something open in him. "I'm sorry," he said aloud, because the words felt heavier spoken than signed. "I should have known. I should have protected you." "I don't need protection," she signed fiercely. "I needed honesty." He nodded slowly. "You're right. M." They stood in silence for a long time, the rain starting again, light but steady. People walked past under umbrellas, glancing briefly, then moving on. The world kept going, indifferent to their heartbreak. Finally, she took a small step back. "Was any of it real?" she signed. Elliot's breath caught. "All of it." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "Then why does it feel like I'm the only one paying for it?" He had no answer. All the words he could have said about intention, about how he'd never meant for this, felt hollow, meaningless. She looked away, toward the wet street where cars hissed through puddles. "I've spent most of my life being someone's lesson," she signed quietly. "Someone's chance to be better, to prove their kind. I thought you were different." "I am," he signed back, his hands shaking. "At least I want to be." Megan's expression softened for just a moment, enough to show the woman he'd met that first night, the warmth, the quiet humor, the strength. But then she took another step back. "I can't do this," she signed. "Not now." Elliot reached out, stopping himself just before touching her arm. "Please," he said softly, "don't let what they did be what defines us." Her eyes flicked up to his, wet and fierce. "Then make sure it doesn't define you either. M." And with that, she turned and walked away, the rain swallowing her figure until she was just another blur against the gray. Elliot stayed where he was, water running down his face, unsure if it was rain or something else. When he finally looked down at his hands, they were trembling not from anger, but from the weight of what he'd lost. He drove home in silence, the kind that pressed against the ribs and filled the lungs like stone. Maisie was waiting on the porch, waving when he pulled up. "Hi, Daddy," she called. He tried to smile, but the expression didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, Bug," he said softly. "You ready for dinner?" "Can we call Miss Megan later?" she asked, hopeful. He hesitated, keys still in his hand. "Not tonight," he said finally. "Miss Megan's busy." Maisie frowned. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart," he whispered, kneeling to meet her gaze. "It's not you. It's just grown-up stuff." She nodded solemnly, as if she somehow understood. He hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of rain and shampoo, grounding himself in the small miracle that was his daughter. Inside, the house felt too quiet. The framed photo of his mother on the mantel seemed to look at him with both pride and question. He sat down beside it, the weight of the day pressing down like winter. In his mind, he replayed Megan's words, every sign etched into memory. "I thought you were different." Outside, the wind rose, carrying the faint sound of chimes from a neighbor's porch. The melody trembled and broke, leaving only silence, and the silence between them said everything. The mornings had grown colder, the kind that made breath visible against the window glass. Autumn was slipping toward winter, and the trees along Willow Street had already turned to bare silhouettes. Elliot woke early, as he always did, but now the quiet felt different, not peaceful, just empty. He stood at the kitchen counter, pouring orange juice into a small cup, while Maisie hummed to herself at the table, drawing something with colored pencils. "That's a volcano, right?" he asked, glancing over. Maisie grinned, her cheeks sticky with toast crumbs. "A friendly volcano. It doesn't explode. It just says good morning." He smiled the first one that day. "That sounds nice. Miss Megan taught me how to sign volcano," she added proudly, her small hands forming the shape in the air. Elliot's heart tightened. "Yeah," he said softly. "She's really good at that." Maisie looked up, her expression curious. "Did she go away forever?" He paused, not expecting the question. "No, Bug. Sometimes grown-ups just need a little time to think." She considered that, nodding gravely, as if it made sense. "When I get sad," she said, "I draw pictures. Maybe you can draw her a volcano." He chuckled under his breath. "Maybe I should." After dropping Maisie off at school, Elliot drove aimlessly for a while, ending up at the park on the edge of town, the one with a wooden bridge and the pond, where ducks gathered every morning. The air was crisp, the world painted in muted gold. He sat on a bench, the cold seeping through his coat, and tried to pray, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to anymore. It had been a week since the confrontation. The video was gone, pulled down after Cal confessed everything to HR and the CFO. Liam had been suspended. Sean had resigned quietly. But none of that felt like victory. He'd won nothing that mattered. What haunted him wasn't the betrayal of colleagues. It was the look in Megan's eyes, the way her trust had shattered like glass. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a napkin, the same one from that first night, the words faint now but still visible. "Thank you for tonight." He kept it there like a small relic of something holy, something he'd broken. A familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. "You feedin' the ducks or the guilt?" He looked up to see Pastor Ray, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, wearing his eternal brown coat and the same easy smile he'd worn since the church basement meetings began. Elliot laughed quietly. "Maybe both." Pastor Ray sat down beside him, the bench creaking under his weight. "Heard about what happened? Folks around here talk faster than the wind." "I'm sure they do." The pastor nodded toward the pond. "You know, when my wife died, I thought forgiveness was a one-time thing, something you give or don't. Turns out it's more like breathing. You have to do it over and over until it sticks." Elliot sighed, eyes still on the water. "I just keep replaying it. Every sign, every word. She trusted me." "Good reason to make it right then." "She won't want to see me," he said quietly. "Maybe not," Ray agreed. "But doing what's right isn't about how it turns out. It's about who you become trying." The words hung there, soft as falling leaves. Elliot turned the napkin over in his hand. "She told me once she was tired of being someone's lesson." "Then show her she's not," Ray said. "Show her she's someone's choice." They sat in silence after that, watching a group of children scatter breadcrumbs toward the water. The ducks quacked and splashed, unbothered by human sorrow. When Elliot finally stood, the wind caught the hem of his coat. "You ever get tired of forgiving people, Ray?" The old man smiled. "Every day. But I do it anyway, because if we stop, we forget how to live." That night, Elliot couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table under the low hum of the fridge, a cup of coffee cooling beside him. The house smelled faintly of vanilla and laundry soap. Maisie's art was spread across the table, bright drawings of mountains and stars and a stick-figure family holding hands. He picked one up. 3 figures, smiling under a yellow sundae, the word family scrawled underneath in shaky letters. Something inside him shifted. Slowly, he turned the paper over and began to write on the back. Not a message of apology, those felt empty now, but a letter of gratitude. To Megan. for reminding him what grace looked like. He didn't know if he'd ever send it, but as he wrote, the tightness in his chest eased, just a little. Outside, the wind carried the sound of the town's church bells. They rang 7 slow notes. Then, silence. 2 days later, the town square filled with the quiet hum of the autumn fair stalls lined with pies, candles, and hand-knit scarves. Elliot hadn't planned to come, but Maisie had begged, her mittened hand tugging at his until he said yes. He followed her through the crowd, trying to match her energy, though his thoughts were elsewhere. Then he saw her Megan at a booth under the oak tree, helping children sign simple phrases like thank you and friend. The sight stopped him cold. She looked peaceful, her hands moving with grace, the same rhythm that had once made him forget the world. He stood at a distance, unsure if he had the right to interrupt that peace. Maisie noticed first. "Daddy, Miss Megan's here," she shouted, running ahead before he could stop her. Megan looked up, startled. "Hi, June," she signed, her smile soft but cautious. Elliot approached slowly, hands buried in his coat pockets. "Didn't mean to intrude," he said quietly. "You're not," she replied, voice calm, though her eyes flickered with something unspoken. Maisie held up her drawing. "I made this for you." Megan knelt, taking the paper with care. "It's beautiful," she signed. "Thank you." And Elliot watched the exchange, the warmth between them easing something deep inside him. When Megan rose, he met her gaze. "I came to tell you I'm sorry," he said. "Not for what they did for waiting this long to say it." She studied him for a long moment, the noise of the fair fading around them. "Sometimes," she signed slowly, "the way we say sorry isn't with words." He nodded. "Then maybe you'll let me show you." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Maisie tugged Megan's sleeve, signing, "Come see the ducks." Megan hesitated, looking between them, father and daughter standing together, quiet, open. She turned and for the first time, didn't walk away. The first snow came early that year, light, uncertain, the kind that vanished as soon as it touched the ground. By the time Elliot pulled up to the park, the sky was already pale with evening, and the lampposts flickered on one by one like patient sentinels. He hadn't expected Megan to come. After the fair, they'd exchanged only a few messages, each one careful, almost formal. Still, when she'd agreed to meet for cocoa with Maisie, he'd felt something like hope stirring again, fragile but real. Maisie ran ahead toward the frozen pond, bundled in her puffy red coat. "Daddy, the ducks are gone." "They flew south, Bug," Elliot said. "Even ducks need vacations." Megan laughed softly from behind him. The sound, even faint, cut through the chill like sunlight. "She's getting tall," she said. "Feels like she's grown a foot since October." "She measures herself against the doorframe every week," he replied. "Claims she's catching up to me." They walked side by side, their breaths misting the air. The silence between them wasn't heavy now, just uncertain, like a new language they were both still learning. "I almost didn't come," Megan said after a while. "I almost didn't ask," Elliot admitted. She looked at him then, eyes soft under the lamplight. "You're not good at giving up, are you?" He smiled faintly. "Guess not. My mother used to say I'd argue with God if he gave me the wrong weather." Megan chuckled, shaking her head. "Sounds like she was right." They reached a bench overlooking the pond. Elliot brushed the snow off before Saturday. From her backpack, Megan pulled out a small thermos. "Hot cocoa," she signed, made the old-fashioned way. He accepted the cup with both hands, the warmth seeping into his fingers. "This might be the best peace offering I've ever received." "Don't push your luck," she teased. Maisie returned, cheeks flushed. She climbed into her father's lap, pointing toward the ice. "Daddy, look! It's shiny like glass." "It's beautiful," he said, "but not strong enough yet. We'll wait till it's ready." Megan smiled at the way he said it, patient, steady, like someone who'd learned not to rush what needed time. After a while, she signed, "I talked to the library board. They want to start a community class for parents with deaf children to teach them sign language basics." "That's amazing," Elliot said, genuinely impressed. "They asked if I'd teach," she continued. "I said yes, but only if you help." He blinked. "Me? You're fluent. You're a counselor. You understand both worlds." He hesitated. "Megan, I don't know if people want lessons from someone whose face was on a viral video. She met his eyes. They will, if they see who you really are. There was no accusation in her tone this time, just quiet faith. The kind he didn't think he deserved, but needed all the same. All right, he said finally. But you're in charge of the syllabus. Deal. Maisie, catching the rhythm of their hands, tried to copy one of the signs. What's that mean? She asked. It means together, Megan said, showing her again slowly until the child's small hands formed it perfectly. Elliot felt something loosen inside him, the way sorrow gives way to peace when it's finally spoken aloud. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about what he'd lost. He was thinking about what could still be built. As they packed up, Megan reached for her scarf, then paused. You ever notice, she said quietly, how forgiveness sounds like silence? He looked at her. No, he said softly. It sounds like breathing again. Her smile lingered small, but real. And for a moment, under the glow of the street lights and the hush of falling snow, it felt like the world had given them both permission to start over. The classroom at the Ashland Public Library smelled faintly of chalk and cinnamon. Someone had set out a plate of cookies on the counter, and a banner over the whiteboard read, Welcome to Sign Together. Elliot stood by the door, watching people file in, parents with nervous smiles, children clutching notebooks, a few older couples curious and kind. The hum of conversation filled the room until Megan entered, carrying a folder under one arm and a quiet confidence that seemed to warm the space more than the heaters could. Maisie waved from the front row, proudly wearing a small name tag that read Junior Assistant. Megan caught Elliot's eye and smiled. You ready? She signed. He nodded, a mix of nerves and gratitude curling in his chest. She began by introducing herself, her hands moving gracefully. My name is Megan, she signed, then spoke softly for those who couldn't yet read the language of motion. I was born deaf, but I've spent my life learning how to listen. A ripple of attention passed through the room. People leaned forward, drawn by the calm strength in her tone. Elliot joined in, demonstrating basic signs, hello, thank you, friend. Soon, the whole group was laughing, hands fumbling through the air, turning awkwardness into shared joy. At one point, a young father raised his hand. How do you say I'm sorry? He asked. Megan smiled gently. Like this? She signed, brushing a flat hand over her heart in a slow circle. But remember, it's not just hands, it's eyes. It's meaning it. Elliot felt the weight of that linger. Across the room, she met his gaze briefly, and for a moment, the lesson became personal again. After class, the small crowd lingered to thank them. Parents shook hands. Children laughed. Someone dropped a cookie and laughed harder. The room felt full of something rare. Lightness, maybe. Or the first quiet bloom of community. When the last person left, Megan began gathering papers. Elliot helped without speaking, stacking chairs, turning off lights. Silence settled again, but it wasn't the same silence that had once divided them. Maisie was drawing on the whiteboard 3 stick figures holding hands under a house. That's us, she said proudly. Megan turned to look. It's beautiful, she signed. What's that word? Maisie squinted, trying to remember the right sign. Megan guided her gently, 2 hands forming the roof of a house. That means home, she explained. Maisie repeated it, smiling. Home. Elliot watched as the 2 of them practiced the motion again and again, their laughter soft, like music made for people who didn't need to hear to feel it. When Maisie ran ahead to collect her coat, Megan lingered by the whiteboard. The drawing still glowed faintly under the lights. She turned to him, her expression thoughtful. Then, with slow precision, she raised her hands and signed one word, home. Elliot didn't answer with words. He simply nodded, his chest tightening with something that felt like peace. Outside, the snow was falling again, steady, quiet, certain. The snow didn't stop that week. It came softly, almost politely, layering the town in white and quiet. For Elliot, it was a season of small beginnings morning cocoa, with Maisie, text messages from Megan that grew a little warmer each day, and a house that didn't echo as much anymore. He'd thought peace would come like thunder, dramatic, final. Instead, it arrived like snowfall, one flake at a time. On Thursday morning, the counseling center felt unusually still. The holidays were close. Most clients had canceled their appointments to travel or rest. Elliot was sorting files when he heard a hesitant knock on his door. Come in, he said. It was Liam. His once polished suit looked worn, his expression unsure. The confident grin that had once grated on everyone was gone, replaced by something fragile, maybe guilt, maybe shame. "Hey," Liam said quietly. "Do you have a minute?" Elliot leaned back, studying him for a moment before nodding. "Sure." Liam closed the door behind him and didn't sit right away. "I've been meaning to do this for weeks," he said. "I just didn't know how." "Starting's the hard part," Elliot replied. The younger man let out a shaky breath. "We were wrong. I was wrong. About you, about what we did. I thought we were proving something, that you were fake, that all that kindness was an act. But when I watched that video again, it wasn't you who looked fake. It was us." Elliot didn't speak. He waited, letting the silence do the work. Liam's voice cracked. "I almost lost my job. HR says I'll get a final decision after the holidays. But even if I stay, I don't think I deserve to." Elliot folded his hands on the desk. "You made a bad choice, Liam, but I don't think you're beyond fixing it." Liam blinked. "You're not angry?" "I was," Elliot said honestly. "Not because of what you did to me, but because of what you did to her. Megan didn't deserve that." Liam swallowed hard. "I know. I sent her a letter last week. I didn't expect her to answer." "She probably won't," Elliot said gently. "But maybe she'll believe you meant it." For a long time, neither spoke. The ticking of the wall clock filled the space between them, slow, deliberate, forgiving. Finally, Liam said, "You could have gone to the board, ruined us. Instead, you just kept working." Elliot smiled faintly. "I have a little girl who watches everything I do. I didn't want her to see revenge and think it looked like strength." Liam nodded, eyes shining. "I don't think I'll forget that." As the man left, Elliot sat back, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The weight in his chest had lessened, not gone, but lighter somehow. Forgiveness, he realized, wasn't something you said once. It was something you kept practicing until it felt natural. That evening, snow fell harder. Elliot drove through the quiet streets of Ashland toward the library. The windows glowed amber in the dusk, and laughter spilled faintly into the cold. Inside, Megan was helping an older woman practice signs for thank you and love. Her movements were patient, precise. When she looked up and saw him, she smiled. Small, cautious, but genuine. He waited until the woman left, then stepped closer. "You taught her well," he said. Megan tilted her head, teasing. "Jealous? Maybe," he admitted. She laughed softly, then grew quiet. "How's work?" "Better," he said. "One of the guys came by today." He apologized. Her brows lifted slightly. "Did you forgive him?" "I'm trying." She nodded, signing slowly. "That's a good start." Elliot studied her hands, how gentle they looked, even after all they'd been through. "You know," he said, "forgiveness is easier when someone shows you how." Her eyes softened. "And who did that for you?" He smiled. "You did." For the first time in months, she didn't look away. Outside, snow kept falling, slow and endless. Inside, two people who'd once spoken in anger now found a language made entirely of grace. That weekend, Megan came over for dinner. The house smelled of rosemary and baked bread. Snow tapped softly at the windows. Maisie had set the table herself, forks uneven, napkins folded like tiny triangles. They ate slowly, laughter coming easily again. Megan told a story about a student who'd tried to sign the word cat but accidentally said banana. Maisie nearly fell off her chair laughing. Elliot just sat back, watching the two of them, his daughter glowing in candlelight. Megan smiling with that quiet confidence that once felt out of reach. After dinner, they made cocoa and sat by the fireplace. The flames danced low, shadows playing across their faces. Maisie leaned against Megan's shoulder, her small hands trying to form the sign for family. Megan corrected her gently, guiding each movement. "Like this," she whispered. Maisie repeated it perfectly this time. Family. Elliot felt something shift, a deep, steady, calm settling where guilt used to live. The sound of the fire, the warmth, the stillness, it all felt like an answer he hadn't known he was waiting for. When Maisie drifted off to sleep, Megan stayed a while longer, watching the snow through the window. "You've done a good job with her," she said softly. "I've had help," he replied, his voice almost a whisper. Their eyes met in the quiet. For a heartbeat, it was enough just to sit there, breathing the same peace. Then he said, "Tomorrow, I have something to ask you." Megan smiled, faintly but certain. "Then ask." M4. The sky over Ashland carried the kind of winter light that made everything look softer, the trees, the rooftops, even the old Riverside Grill sign where it had all begun. Elliot parked across the street, watching the windows glow with that same amber warmth from so long ago. It had been nearly a year since the night of their first meeting. The same table by the window waited inside, a candle flickering where the hostess had placed it, unaware of the memory that table carried. He adjusted his scarf, exhaled into the cold. His fingers brushed against the small velvet box in his pocket, and his heart gave a steady, nervous thud. Megan had agreed to meet him for dinner, just like old times, she'd said in her text, followed by a simple heart emoji. It was the kind of message that didn't need translation. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with soft conversation, forks clinking, Christmas jazz humming in the background. He was early. As usual, he liked the quiet before moments like this, the stillness that felt almost holy. The hostess smiled when she saw him. "Table by the window, Mr. Grayson?" "Yes," he said, his voice calm but his hands trembling slightly. He sat, staring at the snow drifting past the window. For a moment, the memory of that night replayed like an old film, her eyes wide with surprise when he'd first signed to her. The warmth that had filled the air even before their food had arrived. So much had changed since then. Yet somehow, the feeling was the same. The door opened. She entered quietly, brushing snow from her coat, her hair catching the light just as it had the first time. When she saw him, her smile was soft and knowing. "Same table," she said, taking off her gloves. "Some things are worth repeating," he replied. She laughed, a sound that melted years of ache in a single breath. They talked easily through dinner, the conversation winding between work, Maisie's latest science project, and the town's plans for the Christmas parade. There was a steadiness in her now, the kind of peace that comes from surviving storms and still choosing the sky. When dessert came, Megan folded her napkin neatly, then signed. "You seem nervous." "Do I?" he asked, smiling. She nodded. "You only twist your ring when you're hiding something." He glanced down at his hand and laughed. "Guess I'm out of practice at surprises." She tilted her head, amused. "You? Never." He hesitated, fingers brushing his pocket. "You remember what you said the night we met?" Megan smiled. "That I was tired of being someone's lesson?" "Yes," he said. "And I promised myself I'd never make you feel that way again." Her eyes softened. "You didn't," she sighed. "You made me feel seen." The moment lingered fragile, suspended between memory and promise. Elliot reached into his coat pocket and placed a folded piece of paper on the table. It was a drawing, one of Maisie's, the three of them standing beneath a little blue house. Across the top, in uneven handwriting, were the words, "Our family." Megan looked down, smiling as tears filled her eyes. "She's quite the artist," she said softly. "She gets it from her teacher," Elliot said. For a long time, they said nothing else. The restaurant around them faded into a blur of laughter and candlelight, and it was just them, two people who had broken, rebuilt, and somehow found their way home again. He reached for her hand. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," he said. She smiled, the same way she had by the fireplace days ago. "Then ask." The world outside the window glowed silver with falling snow. Inside, the candle on their table flickered, its flame bending in rhythm with the soft hum of music from the piano. Elliot took a slow breath, feeling the pulse of the moment steady beneath his ribs. "Megan," he said quietly, his voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who had already lived through every kind of storm. "There was a time I thought life had given me everything it meant to. A daughter to love, work to keep me busy, memories to live in. I thought that was enough." He paused, eyes never leaving hers. "But then you walked in that night, and you reminded me that enough isn't the same as whole." Her breath caught, the light shimmering in her eyes. Elliot reached into his pocket, pulling out the small velvet box. It rested in his palm like something sacred. "I'm not asking you to fix what's been broken," he said. "We already did that together. I'm asking you to help me keep it whole, to build something steady and kind and ordinary. The kind of life people write songs about but never believe is real." He opened the box, The ring wasn't extravagant, a slender band of gold, set with one small diamond that caught the light like a drop of morning frost. Megan covered her mouth, tears welling before she could stop them. "You once said forgiveness sounds like silence," he whispered. "To me, it sounds like this, like us, here, breathing, after everything." She stared at him, trembling hands pressed to her lips, then signed with deliberate care. "Yes." The room broke into quiet applause. A few strangers at nearby tables smiled, one older woman dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Elliot slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her hands one after the other, reverently, as if thanking them for every word they had ever spoken without sound. When they left the restaurant, the snow was falling harder, swirling around them in thick, gentle flakes. Across the street, Maisie stood bundled in her coat, waiting with Pastor Ray, who gave a knowing grin. "Couldn't let her miss it," he said, winking before stepping aside. Maisie ran into their arms. "Did she say yes?" she demanded, eyes wide. Elliot laughed, lifting her up. "She did." Megan smiled through her tears and signed to the child. "Yes, I did." Maisie giggled, her mittened hands fumbling the signs. "Family?" she asked. Megan nodded. "That's right, family." The three of them stood there under the golden streetlight, father, daughter, and the woman who'd taught them both that love could have its own language. Together, they shaped the word with their hands, slow and sure, the snow catching the light as it fell around them. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. No noise, no rush, just the quiet promise of everything yet to come. And in that silence, there was music after all. Good evening, friends. If you've been with us through this story, you've seen how a man once defined by silence learned to listen again, not just with his ears, but with his heart. You've met a woman who turned her quiet into strength, and a little girl whose laughter stitched two broken lives back together. In a small town dusted with snow, they found not perfection, but peace, the kind that grows slowly, like ivy on an old porch, steady and alive. When the heart remembers, forgiveness doesn't shout. It hums softly in the background of our days, in the sound of the coffee maker at dawn, the crunch of boots on winter sidewalks, or the way someone takes your hand even when words fail. Elliot and Megan didn't find a miracle. They built one, piece by piece, through patience, kindness, and the courage to stay when walking away would have been easier. And maybe that's the lesson tonight, that love isn't the absence of mistakes, but the presence of grace. Redemption doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it's just a warm light waiting for you in the kitchen, or a child's voice whispering, "Family." In this life, everyone deserves a second chance. Kindness, the quiet, unadvertised kind, can change the course of a life. And no matter how lost we think we are, there's always a road that leads us home if we're brave enough to take it. Because just like the porch light that stays on long after the guests have gone, a small act of love can guide someone through the darkest night. So friends, before you go take a moment tonight, think about someone you once turned away from. Maybe it's time to listen again, to forgive, to begin anew. If this story touched your heart, type 1" the comments below. If you think it could be better, or you'd like to share a thought, type 0. Your voice matters here. And as always, wherever you're listening from, may your evenings be gentle, your home be warm, and your heart stay open to every quiet promise still waiting to be heard.